During its long history, Jerusalem has been destroyed twice, besieged 23 times, attacked 52 times, and captured and recaptured 44 times. The oldest part of the city was settled in the 4th millennium BCE, making Jerusalem one of the oldest cities in the world. Given the city's central position in both Israeli nationalism and Palestinian nationalism, the selectivity required to summarize more than 5,000 years of inhabited history is often influenced by ideological bias or background. For example, the Jewish periods of the city's history are important to Israeli nationalists, whose discourse states that modern Jews descend from the Israelites and Maccabees, while the Islamic periods of the city's history are important to Palestinian nationalists, whose discourse suggests that modern Palestinians descend from all the different peoples who have lived in the region. As a result, both sides claim the history of the city has been politicized by the other in order to strengthen the relative claims to the city, and that this is borne out by the different focuses the different writers place on the various events and eras in the city's history. Ancient period, Proto-Canaanite period archaeological evidence suggests that the first settlement was established near Gihon Spring between 4500–3500 BCE. The first known mention of the city was in c. 2000 BCE in the Middle Kingdom Egyptian execration texts in which the city was recorded as Ur-Salamim. The root SLM in the name is thought to refer to either peace or Shalem, the god of dusk in the Canaanite religion. Canaanite and New Kingdom Egyptian period archaeological evidence suggests that by the 17th century BCE, the Canaanites had built massive walls on the eastern side of Jerusalem to protect their ancient water system. By c. 1550 to 1400 BCE, Jerusalem had become a vassal to Egypt after the Egyptian New Kingdom under Ahmose I and Thutmose I had reunited Egypt and expanded into the Levant. The Amarna letters contain correspondence from Abdi-Heba, headman of Jerusalem, and his suzerain Amenhotep III. The power of the Egyptians in the region began to decline in the 12th century BCE, during the Bronze Age collapse. The Battle of Jahi in 1178 BCE between Ramesses III and the Sea Peoples marked the beginning of this decline. The gradual loss of a central power gave rise to independent kingdoms in the region. According to the Bible, Jerusalem at this time was known as Jebus, and its independent Canaanite inhabitants at this time were known as Jebusites. Independent Israel and Judah period. According to the Bible, the Israelite history of the city began in c. 1000 BCE, with King David's sack of Jerusalem, following which Jerusalem became the city of David and capital of the United Kingdom of Israel. According to the books of Samuel, the Jebusites managed to resist attempts by the Israelites to capture the city, and by the time of King David were mocking such attempts, claiming that even the blind and lame could defeat the Israelite army. Nevertheless, the Masoretic text for the books of Samuel states that David managed to capture the city by stealth, sending his forces through a water shaft and attacking the city from the inside. Archaeologists now view this as implausible, as the Gihon Spring, the only known location from which water shafts lead into the city, is now known to have been heavily defended. The older Septuagint text, however, suggests that rather than by a water shaft, David's forces defeated the Jebusites by using daggers rather than through the water tunnels coming through the Gihon Spring. There was another king in Jerusalem, Araunah, during, and possibly before, David's control of the city, according to the biblical narrative, who was probably the Jebusite king of Jerusalem. The city, which at that point stood upon the Ophel, was, according to the biblical account, expanded to the south, and declared by David to be the capital city of the kingdom of Israel. David also, according to the the books of Samuel, constructed an altar at the location of a threshing floor he had purchased from Araunah. A portion of biblical scholars view this as an attempt by the narrative's author to give an Israelite foundation to a pre-existing sanctuary. Later, according to the biblical narrative, King Solomon built a more substantive temple, the Temple of Solomon, at a location which the Book of Chronicles equates with David's altar. The temple became a major cultural center in the region, eventually, particularly after religious reforms such as those of Hezekiah and of Josiah. The Jerusalem temple became the main place of worship, at the expense of other formerly powerful ritual centers, such as Shiloh and Bethel. However, according to K. L. Knoll, in Canaan and Israel in Antiquity, a textbook on history and religion, the biblical account of the centralization of worship in Jerusalem is a fiction, although by the time of Josiah, the territory he ruled was so small that the Jerusalem temple became de facto the only shrine left. Solomon is also described as having created several other important building works at Jerusalem, including the construction of his palace, and the construction of the Millo. Archaeologists are divided over whether the biblical narrative is supported by the evidence from excavations. Eilat Mazar contents that her digging uncovered remains of large stone buildings from the correct time period, while Israel Finkelstein disputes both the interpretation and the dating of the finds. When the kingdom of Judah split from the larger kingdom of Israel, Jerusalem became the capital of the kingdom of Judah, while the kingdom of Israel located its capital at Shechem in Samaria. Thomas L. Thompson argues that it only became a city and capable of acting as a state capital in the middle of the 7th century. Both the Bible and regional archaeological evidence suggest the region was politically unstable during the period 925–732 BCE. In 925 BCE, the region was invaded by Egyptian pharaoh Sheshonq I of the Third Intermediate Period, who is possibly the same as Shishak, the first pharaoh mentioned in the Bible who captured and pillaged Jerusalem. Around 75 years later, Jerusalem's forces were likely involved in an indecisive battle against the Neo-Assyrian king Shalmaneser III in the Battle of Karka. According to the Bible, Jehoshaphat of Judah was allied to Ahab of the northern kingdom of Israel at this time. The Bible records that shortly after this battle, Jerusalem was sacked by Philistines, Arabs and Ethiopians, who looted King Jehoram's house, and carried off all of his family except for his youngest son Jehoaz. 2 decades later, most of Canaan including Jerusalem was conquered by Hazael of Aram Damascus. According to the Bible, Jehoash of Judah gave all of Jerusalem's treasures as a tribute, but Hazael proceeded to destroy all the princes of the people in the city, and half a century later, the city was sacked by Jehoash of Israel, who destroyed the walls and took Amaziah of Judah prisoner. By the end of the First Temple period, Jerusalem was the sole acting religious shrine in the kingdom and a center of regular pilgrimage, a fact which archaeologists generally view as being corroborated by the evidence, though there remained a more personal cult involving Asherah figures, which are found spread throughout the land right up to the end of this era. Neo-Assyrian and Neo-Babylonian empires period. Jerusalem was the capital of the Kingdom of Judah for some 400 years. It had survived an Assyrian siege in 701 BCE by Sennacherib. Unlike Samaria, the capital of the northern kingdom of Israel, that had fallen some 20 years previously, According to the Bible, this was a miraculous event in which an angel killed 185,000 men in Sennacherib's army. According to Sennacherib's own account preserved in the Taylor Prism, an inscription contemporary with the event, the king of Judah, Hezekiah, was shut up in the city like a caged bird, and eventually persuaded Sennacherib to leave by sending him 30 talents of gold and 800 talents of silver, and diverse treasures, a rich and immense booty. The siege of Jerusalem in 597 BCE led to the city being overcome by the Babylonians, who then took the young king Jehoiachin into Babylonian captivity, together with most of the aristocracy. Zedekiah, who had been placed on the throne by Nebuchadnezzar, rebelled, and Nebuchadnezzar, who at the time was ruler of a most powerful empire, recaptured the city, killed Zedekiah's descendants in front of him, and plucked out Zedekiah's eyes so that that would be the last thing he ever saw. The Babylonians then took Zedekiah into captivity, along with prominent members of Judah. The Babylonians then burnt the temple, destroyed the city's walls, and appointed Gedaliah son of Achikam as governor of Judah. After 52 days of rule, Ishmael son of Netaniah, who a surviving descendant of Zedekiah, assassinated Gedaliah after encouragement by Baalus, the king of Ammon. Some of the remaining population of Judah, fearing the vengeance of Nebuchadnezzar, fled to Egypt. Persian Empire period according to the Bible, and perhaps corroborated by the Cyrus cylinder. After several decades of captivity in Babylon and the Achaemenid conquest of Babylonia, Cyrus II of Persia allowed the Jews to return to Judah and rebuild the temple. The books of Ezra and Nehemiah record that the construction of the Second Temple was finished in the 6th year of Darius the Great, following which Artaxerxes I sent Ezra and then Nehemiah to rebuild the city's walls and to govern the Yehud province within the Ebonari satrapy. These events represent the final chapter in the historical narrative of the Hebrew Bible. During this period, Aramaic inscribed Yehud coinage were produced. These are believed to have been minted in and near Jerusalem, although none of the coins bear a mint mark. Classical Antiquity, Hellenistic kingdoms period. When Alexander the Great conquered the Persian Empire, Jerusalem and Judea fell under Greek control and Hellenic influence. After the Wars of the Diadochi following Alexander's death, Jerusalem and Judea fell under Ptolemaic control under Ptolemy I and continued minting Yehud coinage. In 198 BCE, as a result of the Battle of Panium, Ptolemy V lost Jerusalem and Judea to the Seleucids under Antiochus the Great. Under the Seleucids many Jews had become Hellenized and with their assistance tried to Hellenize Jerusalem, eventually culminating in a rebellion by Mattathiyahu the high priest and his 5 sons, Simon, Jochanan, Eleazar, Jonathan and Judah the Maccabee. As a result of the rebellion, Jerusalem became the capital of the independent Hasmonean kingdom. Hasmonean period. The Hasmonean kingdom lasted for 103 years. It was ruled by Simon the son of Mattathiyahu, then by his son Jochanan, who started minting coins, then by his son Yehuda Aristobulus, then by his wife Salome Alexandra, then by his brother Alexander Yanai, then by his sons Hyrcanus and Aristobulus. When the brothers Hyrcanus and Aristobulus each asked for Rome to intervene on their behalf, Judea fell under the greater rule of Rome as an autonomous province but still with a significant amount of independence. The last Hasmonean king was Aristobulus's son Mattathiyahu Antigonus. Roman Jerusalem in 37 BCE. Herod the Great captured Jerusalem, ending Hasmonean rule. Herod ruled the province of Judea as a client king of the Romans, rebuilt the Second Temple, upgraded the surrounding complex, and expanded the minting of coins to many denominations. Pliny the Elder, writing of Herod's achievements, called Jerusalem the most famous by far of the eastern cities, and not only the cities of Judea. The Talmud comments that, "He who has not seen the temple of Herod has never seen a beautiful building in his life," and Tacitus wrote that Jerusalem is the capital of the Jews. In it was a temple possessing enormous riches. Herod also built his area maritima, which replaced Jerusalem as the capital of the Roman province. In 06 CE, following Herod's death in 04 BCE, Judea and the city of Jerusalem came under direct Roman rule through Roman prefects, procurators, and legates. Herod's descendants, and Agrippa II, nevertheless remained nominal kings of the Judea province. In 66 CE, the Jewish population rebelled against the Roman Empire in what is now known as the Great Revolt. Roman legions under future Emperor Titus reconquered and subsequently destroyed much of Jerusalem and the Second Temple in 70 CE. The Second Temple was burnt, and all that remained was the great external walls supporting the esplanade on which the temple had stood, a portion of which has become known as the Western Wall. Titus's victory is commemorated by the Arch of Titus in Rome. Agrippa II died c. 94 CE, which brought the Herodian dynasty to an end almost 30 years after the destruction of the Second Temple. Jerusalem became the birthplace of early Christianity in the 1st century CE. According to the New Testament, it is the location of the crucifixion, resurrection and ascension of Jesus Christ. It was in Jerusalem that, according to the Acts of the Apostles of Christ received the Holy Spirit at Pentecost and first began preaching the gospel and proclaiming his resurrection. Jerusalem eventually became home to one of the 5 patriarchates of the Christian Church. After the Great Schism, it remained a part of the Eastern Orthodox Church. After the end of this revolt, Jews continued to live in Jerusalem in significant numbers, and were allowed to practice the religion only if they paid the Jewish tax. Roman Aelia Capitolina period, what is today known as the Old City, was laid out by the Roman Emperor Hadrian in the 2nd century, when he began to rebuild Jerusalem as a pagan city. In 130, Hadrian visited the ruins of Jerusalem remaining after the First Roman-Jewish War of 66 to 73. He rebuilt the city, renaming it Aelia Capitolina in 135 CE. Hadrian placed the city's main Roman forum at the junction of the main Cardo and Decumanus, now the location of the Muristan. Hadrian built a large temple to Jupiter Capitolinus, which later became the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. He placed restrictions on some Jewish practices, which caused a revolt by the Judeans, led by Simon Bar Kokhba. Hadrian responded with overwhelming force, putting down the rebellion, killing as many as 500,000 Jews, and resettling the city as a Roman colonia. Jews were forbidden to enter the city but for a single day of the year, Tisha B'Av, the fast day on which Jews mourn the destruction of both temples. For the next 150 years, the city remained a relatively unimportant pagan Roman town. Post-crisis Roman and early Byzantine Empire period. The Emperor Constantine, however, rebuilt Jerusalem as a Christian center of worship, building the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in 335. Jerusalem had received special recognition in Canon 7 of the First Council of Nicaea in 325. Constantine's mother, Helena, made a pilgrimage to the city and claimed to have recovered the cross of Christ. Jews were still banned from the city throughout the remainder of its time as a Roman province, except during a brief period of Persian rule from 614 to 629. Middle Ages, Rashidun, Umayyad and Abbasid Caliphates period. Although the Quran does not mention the name Jerusalem, the Hadith assert that it was from Jerusalem that Muhammad ascended to heaven in the night journey, or Isra and Miraj. The city was one of the Arab Caliphate's first conquests in 638 AD, according to Arab historians of the time. The Rashidun Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab personally went to the city to receive its submission, cleaning out and praying that the Temple Mount. In the process, 60 years later the Dome of the Rock was built, a structure enshrining a stone from which Muhammad is said to have ascended to heaven during the Isra. Umar ibn al-Khattab also allowed the Jews back into the city and freedom to live and worship after 400 years. Under the early centuries of Muslim rule, especially during the Umayyad and Abbasid dynasties, the city prospered. Geographers Ibn Hawqal and al-Istaqri describe it as the most fertile province of Palestine, while its native son, the geographer al-Muqaddasi, devoted many pages to its praises in his most famous work, The Best Divisions in the Knowledge of the Climes. Under Muslim rule, Jerusalem did not achieve the political or cultural status enjoyed by the capitals Damascus, Baghdad, Cairo, etc. Interestingly, al-Muqaddasi derives his name from the Arabic name for Jerusalem, Beit al-Muqaddas, which is linguistically equivalent to the Hebrew Beit HaMikdash, the Holy House. Fatimid Caliphate period. The early Arab period was also one of religious tolerance. However, in the early 11th century, the Egyptian Fatimid Caliph al-Hakim by Amr Allah ordered the destruction of all churches. In 1033, there was another earthquake, severely damaging the Al-USA Mosque. The Fatimid Caliph Ali Arizona Zahir rebuilt and completely renovated the mosque between 1034 and 1036. The number of naves was drastically reduced from 15 to 7. Arizona Zahir built the 4 arcades of the central hall and aisle, which presently serve as the foundation of the mosque. The central aisle was double the width of the other aisles and had a large gable roof upon which the dome, made of wood, was constructed. Persian geographer Nazir Khusraw describes the USA Mosque during a visit in 1047. The Haram area lies in the eastern part of the city, and through the bazaar of this you enter the area by a great and beautiful gateway. After passing this gateway, you have on the right 2 great colonnades, each of which has 9 and 20 marble pillars, whose capitals and bases are of colored marbles, and the joints are set in lead. Above the pillars rise arches that are constructed of masonry, without mortar or cement, and each arch is constructed of no more than 5 or 6 blocks of stone. These colonnades lead down to near the Maksura, Kingdom of Jerusalem period. Fatimid control of Jerusalem ended when it was captured by Crusaders in July 1099. The capture was accompanied by a massacre of almost all of the Muslim and Jewish inhabitants. Jerusalem became the capital of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Godfrey of Bouillon was elected Lord of Jerusalem on July 22, 1099, but did not assume the royal crown and died a year later. Barons offered the lordship of Jerusalem to Godfrey's brother Baldwin, Count of Edessa, who had himself crowned by the Patriarch Daimbert on Christmas Day 1100 in the Basilica of Bethlehem. Christian settlers from the west set about rebuilding the principal shrines associated with the life of Christ. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre was ambitiously rebuilt as a great Romanesque church, and Muslim shrines on the Temple Mount were converted for Christian purposes. It is during this period of Frankish occupation that the military orders of the Knights Hospitaller and the Knights Templar have the beginnings. Both grew out of the need to protect and care for the great influx of pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem in the 12th century. Ayyubid, Bari Mamluk and Burji Mamluk period. The Kingdom of Jerusalem lasted until 1291. However, Jerusalem itself was recaptured by Saladin in 1187, who permitted worship of all religions. According to Rabbi Elijah of Chelm, German Jews lived in Jerusalem during the 11th century. The story is told that a German-speaking Jew saved the life of a young German man surnamed Doelberger. Thus, when the Knights of the First Crusade came to siege Jerusalem, one of Doelberger's family members rescued Jews in Palestine and carried them back to Worms to repay the favor. Further evidence of German communities in the Holy City comes in the form of halakhic questions sent from Germany to Jerusalem during the second half of the 11th century. In 1173, Benjamin of Tudela visited Jerusalem. He described it as a small city full of Jacobites, Armenians, Greeks, and Georgians. 200 Jews dwelt in a corner of the city under the Tower of David. In 1219, the walls of the city were razed by order of Al-Mu'asim, the Ayyubid Sultan of Damascus. This rendered Jerusalem defenseless and dealt a heavy blow to the city's status. The Ayyubids destroyed the walls in expectation of ceding the city to the Crusaders as part of a peace treaty. In 1229, by treaty with Egypt's ruler Al-Kamel, Jerusalem came into the hands of Frederick II of Germany. In 1239, after a 10-year truce expired, he began to rebuild the walls. These were again demolished by Nasir Daud, the Emir of Kerak. In the same year, in 1243, Jerusalem came again into the power of the Christians, and the walls were repaired. The Khwarezmian Empire took the city in 1244 and were in turn driven out by the Ayyubids in 1247. In 1260, the Mongols under Hulagu Khan engaged in raids into Palestine. It is unclear if the Mongols were ever in Jerusalem, as it was not seen as a settlement of strategic importance at the time. However, there are reports that some of the Jews that were in Jerusalem temporarily fled to neighboring villages. In 1267, the Jewish Catalonian sage Nachmanides traveled to Jerusalem. In the Old City, he established the Ramban Synagogue, the second oldest active synagogue in Jerusalem, after that of the Karaite Jews built about 300 years earlier. In the middle of the 13th century, Jerusalem was captured by the Egyptian Mamluk Sultanate.